Kurokumo clan sucks. The Limbus company. Right? Well, yes, don't. But I'm here to convince you that it's not complete garbage, and well, also to, show you how to use it to its fullest. I ran a poll recently and they got a whopping 9 votes, but the majority still asked for me to make a guide video, so here I am, yapping for probably 20 or 30 minutes about a suboptimal team that requires 30 minutes worth of footage of just restarts to get optimal skills, but let's get into it. I'll be going over 4 main topics in this video: strengths and weaknesses of the team and its IDs, strategies and gimmicks to optimize damage and bleed infliction, more specific strategies, that's fun, and lastly, should you even use this niche, frankly terrible team?
잘 됐네.
With strengths and weaknesses, something I love about the Kurokumo team as well, their resonance and anti-stagger mechanic. And it makes sense considering they're meant to be fighting in the backstreets. Fights get messy there. But it allows for a number of cool strategies where you can inflict bleed and then, well, tank skills. And on turn 1 with, for example, lay hang, this can be, pretty major. And this can allow for a lot of stuff, especially because you never, ever get staggered. Although Ishmael doesn't get this saving grace, but she does have an evade. As for weaknesses, the count infliction is terrible. Aside from Jane Count Ryoshu, sure, Heathcliff and Ishmael have decent count, but they cannot make up for the fact that John Potency Honglu cannot inflict any count. Same for Ruina, and sure, Gregor inflicts 1 count with his skill 1. Although it can start a bleed stack, it's still not great. Another thing too, while Kurokumo clan inflicts an obscene amount of bleed, they absolutely struggle to fuel most bleed egos because we require envy, especially Sanguine. The most important bleed ego, and they absolutely struggle with just, the fact they don't have envy apart from 1 skill, literally 1 skill. Ishmael's skill 1 that you would literally never use, but they do manage to make up for it in other ways, but they certainly do not make up for it with their damage scaling, because the damage scaling compared to Blood Fiends, for example, is not there, especially due to not having enhanced skill 3. So the closest you get with that being Ishmael's trigger 3 bleed, which is not actually that great, if I'm being completely honest. Not to mention, because the Blood Fiends can just boost lost damage and have a bunch of buffs, and can heal. Yeah, but hey, now for IDs. Heathcliff and Honglu are the potency merchants of this team, both capable of inflicting 13 potency with a single skill, and Heathcliff can technically inflict up to, 34 potency technically, although more realistically, you'd probably get around, if you're doing a lay hang, going against lay hang, turn 1 you could probably get 29 or 32, which is pretty good still. Ishmael though is seriously an awesome support of the team. Man infliction, but the buffs are seriously good, and is incredibly important to the team because, what skill you use. And lastly, Ryoshu. Well, I wouldn't say lastly, but out of the important ones, really, Ryoshu, right? She's mono pierce. I don't know why she's mono pierce, but she's mono pierce despite being on a team full of slash characters. Even the attack that uses her hilt is pierce. But she inflicts 4 count with both her skill 2 and skill 3, which is just crazy. And it's 5 if you're, starting a stack of them. Although her skill 1 is frankly terrible, no bleed at all. Paralyzed isn't the worst though, so makes up for it. But oh my god, Rodian. I really feel bad for her, because if you double slot her, she is actually pretty insane. Especially with the Sanguine Desire passive being able to double her bleed infliction, which means on crit her skill 3, or counter can inflict 20 bleed on crit, of course, which is awesome. Especially since if the target has bleed, then you can guarantee a crit with 10 poise. The issue is, of course, her poise count is awful. Only gaining count from her counter and skill 2, but her counter only gives her 2 counts on use, not even next turn. So that means that next turn you'll only have 1 count, assuming that you don't crit with the counter, which then you'll, basically nothing. So yeah, if you don't have a skill 2 the turn after, you're gonna have to counter again, unless you want to drop the, stack. So yeah, that's kind of bad, especially because the skill 1 just doesn't inflict bleed either. And skill 3, once again, only inflicts a lot of bleed, if she crits. Which, once again, bad poise generation. It's just rough. Although technically, if you use her with Blade Lineage Yisang and Blade Lineage Dawn support passives, she has potential. The issue is Yisang doesn't have a conditional where if the highest sanity ID doesn't gain poise from skills, then they'll be skipped, meaning that she will almost never get buffed from her passive because she'll be using Sanguine, and also not in the first slot, so she won't be getting, the SP gain from Chromer Faust, which is just yikes. So yeah, sorry Rodian. And lastly, Potential Man. Well, except he has literally no potential, because his potency infliction is purely from heads hits. Yeah, purely from heads hits. Unless you're, including Clash Winds, but that's, seriously now. His buffs, debuffs, they're pretty buns, I'm gonna be honest. I mean, with the exception of Coin Power next turn. Well, Coin Power down next turn, of course. But that's it. The attack power is also inflicted by Heathcliff, so just why? And can we talk about how he is a clan captain, but literally a 2-star? The second 2-star, well, not second, but out of the 6 people on the team, he's one of the 2-2-stars. And he's also the worst ID on the team. The other 2-star is way better than him. But enough my hopeless rambling on every flaw of this team. Time for the longest section, strategies and gimmicks to frankly optimize this fodder syndicate. Kurokumo clan has a thing going for it strategy-wise, mainly because of the duo, Ishmael and Heathcliff. Of course, with a 3 or 4 less res, if Heathcliff can retaliate with his skill 1 or even his counter. And this is useful not only for extra damage and bleed infliction, but also for fueling resources and gaining defense power up next turn. You see, there are some finer details on the kits of the 2 more recent additions to the Kurokumo team, such as Heathcliff's skills giving him defense power up next turn, of course. But this is really important because it allows for better rolls on his counter that inflicts a lot of bleed, and is the main reason why he does so much total damage against bosses like Leihang. On top of that, Ishmael's evade can give the whole team potentially 2 defense power up, helping Heathcliff even further. This is also there are some more minor things such as slash fragility and attack power down that you do get from Heathcliff, but it's nothing too crazy. Also, back to his Clash Roll counter. I kid you not, this can inflict 12 bleed with Cumulus Wool, or alternatively if you just have Dark Cloud Blade, and then of course, what's it called? Oh yeah, Battle Ready. If, for the Wool 3 conditional. But with just Dark Cloud Blade and Dark Cloud, you can inflict 8 per counter, or 16 assuming you get 2 allies on 2 life support. But back to Ishmael. her skill 2 is insanely cracked. Giving damage up to all out by Kurokumo IDs. Straight up also inflicting 2 fragile with a heads hit on the first coin. Well, if there's 6 Kurokumo IDs on the field. So why is this so relevant? Well, it's because if you could assume, this attack will make me shit, but I won't die. You could have Rodion or Gregor simply tank that shit, and boom, 8 potency for free. Thanks, team. Now, this next part isn't really a strategy, it's truth that I mentioned in the previous paragraph. So I put my hand on your shoulder when I say, you are going to have to reset a bunch of times if you want to see any level of good performance of this team. For example, you guys have seen my 5-turn Lei Hang fight, but believe it or not, I managed to beat him in 4 turns. And, well, that video is out now, but probably most of you didn't even really see it, unfortunately, because thank you, YouTube algorithm. So, yeah, I had been doing constant attempts and trying to get that, but the reason it took forever is because of the resets. The context, in order to get the optimal reset to get him in 4 turns, I need Ryoshu and Heathcliff to have their skill 3s, while everyone else except Brody has their skill 2. Sounds easy enough, right? Wrong, because Kurokumo is not a one-size-fits-all solution. This stuff somewhat bleeds into the boss specific stuff, but all you need to know is you need to get really lucky with speeds and orders. Mainly because of the strategy I was doing. Because of Hung Lu's stupid skill 2 conditional, and the fact that the majority of bosses who are almost always faster than our sinners, by the way, like in canon, roll terribly slow. I don't have much else to add for strategies and gimmicks, sorry, but I will go over some skill rotation stuff briefly. Heathcliff. Just make sure you always have a 3 or 4 Lust Res so you can get a free lenticular brand off. For the defense power up, of course. All you really gotta do is just, well, use a skill 2 when he has Dark Cloud, because that 1 extra count is really valuable. And try not to use the skill 3 if the enemy is staggered next turn, because, well, you can't use a counter against a staggered enemy. Ishmael. Use Evade to buff Heathcliff, or your allies' defense skills, I guess. Use your skill 2 to buff everyone, and for a count, of course. Only really use Inkover if you use Sanguine, because the last count, funnily enough, inflicts 1 extra potency, just straight up, like the last coin. Last coin just inflicts 1 extra potency if you have Sanguine active. And it also won't eat it at your damn count. Instead, it will actually inflict 2 count. You don't always need to get a 4 Lust Res, but if you don't, then you can't just lose clashes on purpose to trigger bleed more, and no anti-stagger. If you're screwed over with bad RNG, use 4 Res if the Dark Cloud wouldn't be applied to both Ryoshu and Heathcliff for more count. And another thing, her skill 2, it doesn't just buff the entire team a little bit. No, it's like what? Like 40% extra damage to the entire team, except for her. I might need to recheck that. It might be 50%, but I'm pretty sure it's 40% because of, the 4 damage up. Think about that for a second. 40% extra damage for the entire team. Anywho, back to Hung Lu. Hung Lu, right? Just try to make sure you can use the skill 2 early. His 3 extra potency passive also works with his skill 3 despite the last coin being paralyzed. Though he needs heads hits for max value on the skill 3, sadly. With Ryoshu, I can't really say stuff about her. She's just the Unga Bunga count infliction. You probably want to double slot her unless you're, double slotting anyone from the duo. So double slot her if you aren't using Superbia Sanguine or doing the, double Sanguine tech, or just if you're doing a longer boss fight in general. Her skill 3 only inflicts potency with the first coin on heads hit though, so do be aware of that, so you can either, try to win a clash of it, or if you have like both skill 2 and skill 3, and you're starting a stack, clash with the skill 2 first and then skill 3 if you can, right? Just so you get that guaranteed. You don't want to get screwed over by that small percent. FODDER. She is really not important in terms of skill rotation, but if you want her full potential, Sanguine first turn, if then second turn, assuming you do the tech, but you know, one turn is good too. Then either counter or skill 2, then either skill 2 again, if it counters at skill 3, or gamble to 60% with your counter or skill 3 and hope you crit for 20. Because yeah, you could just inflict 20 potency like that. But once again, poise, luck, yeah, it's not great. And then Gregor. He's pretty useless, right? Pretty useless, but I guess just, you know, use a skill 3 before an enemy drops a massive move next turn, or use a skill 1 to win a clash if you want to start a bleed stack. So like if he's the fastest, you know, fastest ally, if you win a clash with your with his skill 1 and you have Dark Cloud, you'll actually start the Rupture stack with 3 count. Rupture, what the hell am I talking about? Bleed. Sorry, I got brain rot right there from the Asias last season. But yeah, 3 bleed count, just like that, which is also pretty nice. Now for boss specific stuff. This section is not that important unless you want to try beat delay hang and lower turn count, or maybe you just want to learn principles or strategies, right? The biggest decision first starts with who is in the earliest deployment order. Since there's only 6 members in the Kurokumo team, you can technically bring someone else like Manager Dawn, Big Sang, or even T. Corbotus for Time Moratorium, but that's lame, right? That's lame. The only good options when it comes to bosses specifically are Heathcliff, Ishmael, and Yoshu. Although against trios, you know, trio bosses, Rodian could be good, since double slotting here would mean her poise is better and she's more capable of, you know, hitting that crit for skill 3, which doesn't sound that important, but it basically just means you're able to inflict more bleed just within a short amount of time. I haven't really tested that though. That's more of a theoretical thing. So don't take my word for it. You can just go with the good old, you know, Ishmael or Heathcliff. But you know, you're just better off double slotting those guys, or even Hong Lu. Hong Lu would probably be a better pick just because, you know, skill 2 or skill 1, yeah. But let's go over the pros and cons of these 3 options in particular. With Ishmael, you get the least count infliction of the 3, and your potency infliction is alright. But a neat bonus is that you can clash with one skill and then, well, use your other slot for an evade, which is good against, you know, of course, unbreakable coins. But the biggest advantage is you're able to use your skill 2 more often, meaning you can get that massive damage buff for the rest of your Kurokumo units more often. While generating bleed damage does more of the heavy lifting, the damage buff is just, well, you know, it's 40% for the entire team. It's just too good to turn down. With Heathcliff, you have better count infliction, but the absolute best, and I mean best, potency infliction, as well as a few decent buffs. But the main perk is that you're able to get the highest amount of defense power up, since, well, you can use your skill 2 and skill 3, and then have an ally get attacked, get your skill 1, and then that means next turn you'll have, well, the max amount of defense power up, assuming that on next turn you end up using Ishmael's evade. He also just rolls great in general and is rather consistent. Sorry, Hanlu. Ryoshu. Ryoshu. The only reason you run her is, well, for longer, more drawn out fights where you really need that count, especially since the Sin generation on this team is terrible. So you're likely only ever going to use Sanguine with Superbia. Outside of that, there is no reason, because she is mono pierce, rolls meh, her defense and skill 1 are also pretty damn useless, and you just don't, just don't get the damage you do from the other 2. One last thing that is a more generalistic boss strat If you want to try to trigger bleed as much as possible, try to lose clashes with skills that have the most coins possible. You can even do this with egos, by the way. You could do this with egos if you have them. Just make sure that you just don't run out of counts randomly, right? Just make sure that doesn't happen. Now, on to the actual boss strats. Against Lehang, the best strategy for getting 4 or 5 turn clears is Superbia Sanguine Desire turn 1. Pretty much you want Rodian to get staggered by Lehang before she actually uses the skill. So make sure she is slower than Lehang, not equal, and of course not clashing anything when using Sanguine. It's easier to do this if she's under level 2, because if she's like level 55 or higher, it takes 2 pride skills for her to get staggered and 1 envy skill to get staggered. But if you have a far lower level, it only takes 1 pride skill, and that helps a lot because that will save you like at least like 4 resets. During this turn, of course, you need, and I mean need, to get a 4 Lust Res and try and inflict 40 plus bleed, 50 if you can, on this turn. Your main priority is using either Heathcliff skill 3, if then having him use rolls of the backstreet twice, if then lenticular rend once, which will give you what, 32 potency, like, which is kind of crazy. Or using Hulu skill 2 with the coin reuse. You can do both, but that requires pretty insane skill RNG, especially since, well, you need Rodian to get staggered. But if done right, you'll be able to use Sanguine Desire 2 turns in a row. However, you could just try to manage your count on turn 2 so that you get 2 more uses out of Sanguine. How? Well, simple. When Lehang is using Tangle Cleaver, or any boss really is using an attack skill that just ends the turn after their attack, you can have Sanguine be used unopposed, meaning the passive to not drain count is active, but you will not use it, thus keeping it. That was a very important thing, that you stagger Lehang on turn 2. Well, otherwise you'll get a 5 or 6 turn clear, which some of you may not care about, but you won't, and I mean you won't, be able to get a 4 turn clear, right? Turn 3 is pretty much just do whatever, and just try and get to 90 potency before turn 4, or inflict an extra count, so like you'll probably clash with like, well, like maybe probably use like one of the main 3, Ryoshu, Heathcliff, or Ishmael. You'd clash with one of those 3, just whatever does better, just to get either that little bit of extra count in before turn 4, or a little bit of extra potency before turn 4. And then as for turn 4, well, you'll likely not have Sanguine unless you manage to save it an extra turn, which if you did, good for you. Then just try and figure out how to trigger bleed as much as humanly possible. Maybe have a Sinner or 2 get to 25% HP, do all that stuff. Just, try to get as much damage out, have rules of the backstreets used a couple times because of that mechanic. Now, if you don't have Sanguine, which is most likely, it's basically the same strat, but you do need to think more, because you don't have unlimited bleed count. Because of that, you should of course try to manage count, but do remember you can do a bunch of unopposed attacks to stack some last minute potency or count, and you can always use a Prigatia. I think that's how you say it. I forgot. You can always use Prigatia to have this. You can always use Prigatia to have his speed after all, or even Ira to have one specific senior spontaneously end up on life support, but then hit back and have Heathcliff use rolls the backstreets. It's also kind of important because sometimes just randomly if one sinner dies, your entire team will distort the next turn. Now for bosses with more coins or even sinner restrictions such as Rian or Pinky Nurse Father, Ryoshu is almost always mandatory as the first thought. And the first turn against these bosses is generally just tank most of it. Inflict some bleed near the end, and, well, ultimately it's because you want to save Superbia Sanguine for the next turn. Unless you're able to pull some crazy bullshit where, like, Rodian is, able to do, like, that tech again. Although you might not want to do that against Rian, because then, he's gonna get more of his, prescripts completed. And then boom, you're gonna have to clash against an absolute demon. For example, against Pinky Nurse Father, right? You'd want to have Ishmael evade all the Gluttony Unbreakable skills so that you just, don't have to clash against them because that drains more count. And you would have you'd have the fastest center clash the first 3 coin skill, with Ryoshu using 2 of her, either skill 2 or skill 3s with Dark Cloud to clash the other envy skills. So this strategy pretty much requires that you end up having someone faster than her, but she's the second fastest, right? So you either have you can have anyone. You could literally have anyone. It just as long as they're not Ishmael. Well, I mean, they can be Ishmael technically, but then don't want to do eat shit and stagger, right? You don't really want that. Then from there, pretty much just have no one else clash. Even you'd have to just tank the pride skill, unfortunately. But next turn, you're going to be able to do Superbia Sanguine and just go crazy with Infliction. And, well, for the last turn and third turn, if you've gotten lucky enough, just proc bleed as much as possible. You can be on life support by the end of it. All that matters is you get rid of that shield, and then boom, 3-turn like that, like in my video. Now, Rian is a lot more drawn out and complicated, but just make sure Ishmael is his target for the first 2 turns. You could just have her be the target for the first 1 turn, but 2 turns it'll make your life easier. Well, it wouldn't make your life easier. You got to do more resets, but the rest of the fight will be easier, right? And of course, you want to use Superbia Sanguine on turn 2, not turn 1, because, well, you only have 5 sinners, not 6, which, yeah, you're going to have even less bleed infliction. Now, you want to try to use Ishmael's Envy skill to get more resources, right? You could either do this during, actually, no, you wouldn't do this during the first turn because, well, once again, you're evading. But you can do this during when he's staggered, because by then your damage is going to get reduced to 0 at one point because they do that for some reason. So, yeah, just use that to get some extra resources there if you do end up staggering him. And you should be able to get 6 or 7 turn. Well, shit. I swear that was not on purpose. But yeah, Rian is majorly just improvising with a few steps. Just do not let him fulfill his prescripts and try to manage count. First 2 turns at the roughest, and well, once again, no 6th sinner to bring. Because, well, simply put, Kim Ji-hoon was too afraid of the sheer aura of Kurokumo Gregor. Now, my dear viewer, I sincerely thank you for watching until the end. Unless you were a bum that you skipped till here. But that's besides the point. We have but one last topic, which is, should you even use this team, right? Should you even consider laying your eyes upon this team? Well, I am obviously biased, but I do have the Glazes team just a bit. Well, yes, it has less potential than the Blood Fiends or just a regular bleed team. And you need to get lucky with skill order. It is somewhat fun, at least for me. And because of the anti-stagger and unbreakables, it's actually rather consistent, since the game can often be a bit snowbally with clashes. The Dark Cloud effect really fights back against that, and losing clashes can even be somewhat beneficial in the right scenarios. So to end this video, I believe that you should try this team if anything from my coverage in this video has appealed to you. Thanks for watching and enjoy the rest of your day.